Today, we're diving into a really strange paradox of our modern world. It's this idea that being quietly, consistently good at what you do can somehow, against all logic, make you completely invisible.
I mean, you know that feeling, right? You're showing up, you're doing the work, you're competent. But the promotions, the credit, even just a simple sense of being seen, it's just not there. Well, it turns out there's a powerful theory that actually gives this incredibly frustrating experience a name.
So, we've all heard of the Rockstar effect. That winner-takes-all world where just a tiny advantage in performance can lead to these massive, totally disproportionate rewards. But what we're exploring today is its polar opposite, the reverse Rockstar effect. This is where being highly competent doesn't just fail to get you ahead, it can actually make you systematically invisible. So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll define what this effect really is. Then we'll get into the mechanics of how this invisibility actually happens. After that, we'll look at a kind of exploitation that has nothing to do with money. We'll also see why this is less of a conspiracy and more of a mundane, everyday tragedy. And finally, we'll ask the big question, what could resisting this even look like?
All right, let's dive right in with Section 1 and really try to get our heads around this so-called paradox of merit.
So here it is, the core definition. This isn't about losing a fair fight to someone who's simply better than you. No, this is about being shut out of the game entirely, just by being consistently overlooked. Your skills are essential for the system to even function, but you, the actual person, are denied the rewards. And that means both the tangible stuff, like a raise, and the symbolic stuff, like just getting a little bit of credit. And this is what it feels like. You're living in this zone of indistinction. You're so reliable and you get things done so smoothly that you don't cause any drama. You're not a huge, flashy success that everyone's talking about, but you're also not a failure that needs to be managed. You just exist. Your competence literally becomes part of the furniture, like the background hum of the air conditioner that no one even notices anymore.
So, how does this actually play out in our day-to-day interactions? What happens when the invisible person finally has enough, and decides to actually say something about it?
Just picture it for a second. After months, maybe even years of feeling totally overlooked, you finally work up the courage to say, hey, I feel like my work isn't being seen here. I'm feeling really left out. The response you get is absolutely key to understanding this entire phenomenon. A kind of social defense mechanism kicks in, and it happens in 4 steps. First, you get that quick nod of acknowledgement. Oh, that sounds awful. Then comes the pity. I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. But here's the pivot, step 3, psychologization. Suddenly, the problem is reframed as your internal issue. Maybe you're dealing with some anxiety or burnout. And then finally, dismissal. The focus shifts entirely to fixing you, not the toxic environment that created the problem in the first place. And this quote just nails it. A protest against a very real, social, systemic problem is expertly flipped back onto the individual. The structural issue of invisibility is magically transformed into your personal psychological failing. You're told to work on your confidence, be more positive, promote yourself, and just like that, the system is completely off the hook. And that brings us to our third section, because this builds into something way bigger than just hurt feelings. We're talking about a genuine form of exploitation, but one that goes way beyond your paycheck. Usually, right, we think of exploitation in material terms, not getting paid enough for your work, but there's this whole other layer, symbolic exploitation. This is when the credit, the recognition, and the social capital that your work creates are basically stolen. It's recognition theft, when your idea suddenly becomes the team's idea, or even worse, gets credited to a more visible coworker. It's also emotional extraction, where you're expected to perform all this enthusiasm for a system that gives you absolutely nothing back. All this suggests that we're not actually living in a meritocracy, are we? Instead, this theory argues we're in a visibilitocracy. In a system like this, it's not about how good you are, it's about how seen you are. Success becomes all about perception, personal branding, and just your ability to make a lot of noise around what you do. Quiet competence? Well, that's just not enough. Now, it's really easy to hear all this and think there must be some sort of evil conspiracy at play. But the theory argues it's something far more chilling than that. It's just the result of simple collective indifference. Yeah, pulling from Hannah Arendt's famous concept of the banality of evil, the theory says this social abandonment isn't driven by malice or hatred. It's driven by a million tiny, thoughtless non-actions by people who are just going about their day, following social scripts without thinking. It's not one big dramatic act of exclusion. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's the invitation to lunch you didn't get, the moment your idea was misattributed, the glance that just passes right over you in a meeting, the choice someone makes to talk to the person next to you instead. Each one is so small, so individually defensible, you can't even complain about it. But together, they build a suffocating wall of invisibility. And this leads to this really insidious behavior called empathetic dismissal. This is when the community says, wow, we see you're in pain and that's so sad for you. But they completely fail to connect that pain to their own collective actions. They offer you sympathy, which costs them nothing, but they avoid taking any responsibility, which would require them to actually change. So if this is the game we're all in, is there any way to fight back? Well, the theories suggest that resistance doesn't start by trying to play the game better or become more visible. It starts with a radical act of refusal. The theory points to this classic, powerful line from Herman Melville's story. Bartleby doesn't argue, he doesn't protest, he doesn't try to explain himself, he simply refuses to participate. This is about rejecting the terms of the game itself, not about trying to win a game that's rigged from the start. So what does that actually look like in real life? Well, it means refusing to perform that fake enthusiasm. It means when people try to make it about your psychology, you calmly insist that the problem is social. It means finding solidarity with the other people who are being abandoned. And maybe most importantly, it means turning the lens on yourself and actively fighting against your own indifference toward others. And that leaves us with this final, really challenging thought. This entire phenomenon is powered by indifference, which we tend to think of as a neutral, passive thing. But this theory argues it's not passive at all. It's an active form of social violence. So the question isn't just for those who feel invisible. It's for all of us. If we truly want to build genuine communities where people are seen and valued, what does that require from each of us every single day?